Okay, real quick one tonight on how to do deformation animation in Krita. The kind of thing you would do with the plastic tool in opentoonz, or you could do in Blender by mapping a plane, mapping an image or a sequence to a plane and then just subdividing the plane and deforming it. Well, you can do the same kind of thing in Krita. Here's how. So here's actually the example. I just started out with this drawing of this character, and then I want to be able to try to sort of hopefully move her in an organic way. Well, the key is here in this tool. Let's see what it's called. Let me switch to the move tool and mouse with this. Okay, this is the Control T, transform a layer or selection. So, and this will not work on multiple layers at the same time. You do have to bake your character down to a single layer. So if you're going to be doing, say, lip sync, I would add the lip sync after you do this type of thing. But so this is your basic drawing of the character. The basic deformation tool only lets you scale it or move it. Hit escape. And if you hit control, you can actually move it in perspective. So there may be times when that's useful. And actually this might be a good example because here she's kind of in a straight on orientation, and turning it like this really kind of does make it look like she's turned sideways. Now you could make the effect even better by probably actually by taking this and then stretching it a bit this way. And actually I'm going to go ahead and use the perspective tool. Yeah, I don't like that. So in other words, I need more control. What am I going to do? I'm going to hit escape. Okay, so there's this transformation or deformation tool has a lot of different variations. The warp tool is useful. If I choose warp, it will subdivide my, I'm going to say my character. Everything that is not transparent becomes what Krita treats as the image. So even though it's a full, this drawing is the full size of the drawing area, it knows that there's only ink and paint in this area, and so it knows what to select. But in any case, the warp tool then lets you do this sort of thing. As far as I can tell, the algorithm for doing that is, it's not bad, but it's not great. So it doesn't look as good now as it'll look after you hit the enter key and let it kind of render that deformation. But it's not the greatest and probably not the best for sort of organic looking animation. Probably the best for that in many respects would be this last option, which is Liqufy. And what I find is if I use a really big radius, you can make a character appear to, turn, or you can very nicely fine-tune the deformation. So I would say Liqufy, and you can freeze frame this and look at my settings. But honestly, I think they're like the defaults. No, they're probably not. The amount being 0.01, in other words, you want very little deformation to occur, or to put it another way, you want to be able to move your mouse a lot and not have the pixels go fly 2 or 3 miles, which I think actually the defaults were kind of that way. So I've got the size set to whatever I happen to want at the time, which usually I err on the side of making it big. The amount 0.01 and the spacing 0.01. So there's options to do things other than move with this tool, such as size, rotate. Let me try the rotate. From what I recall, this gets really out of control quickly. Yeah, see, it's, to me, it's basically worthless. But now I just did this deformation, so now I'm going from this to this. And if you look really, really close, you will find that when you deform your drawing, if you look closely at the ink lines will get degraded. So ideally, it's kind of like you don't want to do it, you don't want to liquefy it, deform it, and then deform it some more and do a bunch of in-betweening this way, because the image will degrade very badly, very quickly. Okay, so now I'm going to remove this keyframe. So I sort of go back to my starting point. This one right here called cage, I have found is quite useful. It says create 3 points on the canvas to begin, but you can create any amount you want. What's interesting about it is, so let's say I want this to be like the plastic tool in opentoonz. Now, with the cage tool, if you cross the character, the character will be cut, which is never going to be what you want. So what you really want to do is kind of go like this, and maybe add a couple control points right here at this neck region, and you'll see why in a minute. But again, you don't need a zillion control points, but you just want to fully enclose the character. Okay, so now we're going to deform the layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hit Control. I'm pressing the Control key. And I'm selecting this batch of control points. And now if I go, if I'm inside of this area, you can kind of see how it kind of works kind of intuitively in terms of the way it deforms it. And not only that, but you can step outside here and you can rotate it. You can rotate those control points. In this case, if I was going to fine-tune it, I'd probably do something like that. Hit Enter. So again, this is, you're not going to do huge, major tons of animation this way. And, you know, if the character has to move a lot, it's just redraw the character. Or maybe cut it up into pieces and move the pieces around. But for adding subtle animation, slight changes of attitude, this sort of thing, I'm finding that these tools in Krita, transform, layer selection, the hotkey is Control T. And then mainly the cage tool, probably my second favorite would be Liqufy, and then my third favorite would be the warp tool. Because one thing you can also do with the warp tool is you can draw your cage the same way you do with the cage tool. So I can go ahead and put these control points, and then, but with the warp tool, you can cross your character. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a bunch of extra points here at the neck, and then go like this, and then come over here and hit lock points. And now, same thing I did with the cage tool. I'm just going to hit Control, so I grab just the control points I want. Now what should happen is everything sort of below this neck area should be sort of left alone because it's got all these extra control points here. So, you know, I'm going to say it kind of works and it kind of doesn't. So I can see what I did wrong. I should have put more control points down in the body. But I think the takeaway here is you can see that the warp tool, like, each of these control points does not mathematically see to it that it controls everything up until the point where another control point would take over. So in other words, because it doesn't seem to have that intelligence, if you bend things very much, you can see how they start getting angular and bent out of shape in a way that you really don't want. Whereas with the cage tool, the way it treats the whole thing as a unit seems to be much more intuitive. So again, I'm going to do this last demonstration, then call it a night. So again, using the cage tool, the way I would do it is I would put a control point here. Just basically surround your character completely. And then once it's enclosed in a cage, you know, and one other thing that, you know, unfortunately, the cage tool will not retain its memory, like you from one keyframe to another. So you can't do this right here, okay? Which is that's kind of a nice little move. All right. Now if I hit the cage tool again on this frame, okay, let me think about this. If I hit it on this frame, it remembers its cage. If I were to go to a different keyframe, it would lose that. So here's what I'm wondering. What if I'm going to just try this. I'm going to go Control, copy. I'm going to go back to this frame. I'm sure this isn't going to work. Yeah, see, so I lost the cage. So that's the downside. Hopefully this is something maybe the developers will tweak in a future version, because it would be nice if you could have it remember the cage, because then functionally you're able to use it almost like a skeleton tool. you know, which is, oops, I just blew that. So pretty useful for, like I said at the beginning, if you have a character and you just want to sort of convey like a change in attitude, you know, she leans forward. I just find this cage tool does a really, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Does a very commonsensical type of deformation. You know, it's like it gives you what you're looking for. Okay, so anyway, there it is, and there it is in motion, which obviously her motion doesn't make a lot of sense, but now if I wanted to, I can animate over top of that, add lip sync, whatever. So anyway, that's it for tonight. I just wanted to show those deformation tools in Krita because I think they're pretty powerful, pretty useful. And if you have questions or comments, post them below. You know what to do, and have a great night.